Welcome to the stream, Martin. So good to have you here. How are you doing?
We're good.
Thank you. You got to welcome them with some
the live audience.
The live audience is really just, they couldn't hold that.
They're out of control.
Yeah. Anyway, thanks so much. Thank you so much for joining us. I'd love to know your take. Let's just jump right into it since we're running a little bit behind. Cursor, obviously, it's becoming this front end, almost aggregation play. It's the front end to AI coding. It's potentially model agnostic. What does that mean? What have you learned from the Cursor journey around how value accrues across application layer versus foundation model layer?
Yeah, so I think that there's two things, that led up to this Cursor moment, and one of them is one of the first use cases for AI was code, right? We had Microsoft Copilot, and a lot of people used it, there's a bunch of users and their behavior was trained by Microsoft, but the models weren't quite good yet, and in the last year we had this RL movement. Mm-hmm. And as a result, the models got way, way better. And then Cursor just happened to have this kind of magic timing where it did something very similar to what Copilot looked like, but used these greater models. And now that they've kind of caught the wave, they're able to not only serve these amazing models, but for every magic experience you see the users have, they're starting to have their own smaller models. And so it's just very unique point in time, very unique position, and then of course a very unique technology wave behind it.
Going back to the foundation model layer, can you talk about how your thinking around open source in the foundation model wars has evolved? I remember you and John Ludig were talking about it last year. Since then, we've had Llama 4, which kind of fell backwards, but then DeepSeek was a huge moment. And we just had a guest on the show yesterday who was talking about the importance of offering the world open source foundation models that they can build on, because if we don't do it, our near peer adversaries might. How has your thinking evolved, if at all, and where are you seeing the most opportunity in the foundation model wars?
Yeah, so it's not clear to me that the model space is significantly different than the software space when it comes to open source. So in the software space, we've got 20 years of history of this. The closed solutions tend to aggregate the value first and the quickest. And the reason is you kind of need to make money to change people's behavior, right? And, this is you need to have Unix before you have Linux, and you need to have Oracle before you have MySQL, et cetera. And the same thing seems to me to be playing out in this AI space, which is, of course, OpenAI was first, and they've aggregated a ton of value, and, Anthropic for code. And then, even if you look at the non-language models image, Midjourney was first, and that's closed in 11 labs. And so it seems to me like the first movers will close source, and they'll continue to close source, and they'll aggregate a lot of value. But then for every first mover, there's always the opportunity to enable the masses, right? Like everybody else. And there's always a lot of value there, right? And this is kind of where these open source models come in. And what's amazing, and everybody should realize, is just because DeepSeek is out there hasn't changed the calculus or the growth of these other companies, right? It's been fully accretive. And so I think the only sin anybody can make in AI from an investor standpoint is zero-sum thinking, because the reality is every time something new gets introduced, it's not at the expense of something else. It kind of finds new territory to gain value in. And open source is no different. So it's a very important part of an ecosystem. It's been part of the software ecosystem for a very long time. It'll continue to be. I do think that, U.S. Should have open source models, and I think it's very important for continued U.S. presence and technology in that conversation. But it feels very healthy to me, both the dynamic with existing closed companies and then new companies that can be built on the open source.
Yeah. Are you a fan of aggregation theory, or this idea of the front door to artificial intelligence? Cursor is kind of that for coding, and we're seeing that in other applications that are popping up where the underlying model might not even matter. And where I'm going with this is that there's one world where another country wants their own foundation model, so they know that the weights are trained in a way that they want, aligned with their views on speech, for example. But there's another world where the individual countries should be thinking about how do we create the dominant consumer app that people actually use? Because even if we have the model, if nobody's using it because they're just opening up a certain URL and they go to another country's model, what do you think of there?
I mean, I think the story of AI has been the markets are much larger and they're growing much faster than anybody had expected. And that's just resulted in actual fragmentation. So everybody had these theories early on, if you remember. Oh, there'll only be one model. Oh, the models are not defensible. Oh, the apps are just GPT wrappers. Oh, like the apps are going to take all the value. And you know what? They're all wrong. Like everybody's been wrong. Like the only people that have been right are like, you know what? These things are massive. Yeah. I mean, let's just take OpenAI, which is one of the most remarkable companies and maybe forever in tech, right? But they were the first to image. Remember that with DALL-E? They lost it. Yeah. They were the first to code with Copilot. They were the weights. They lost that. Yeah. They were the first to video. And like, Sora was amazing and remarkable, but like they're not the leaders in video. Yeah. And yet they're still the dominant AI company on language, right? So what are the takeaways you can take from that? Like in my view, it's, every one of these is a massive, massive market that's too big for one company. And so like, OpenAI has done a great job focusing on ChatGPT. And you could have the same discussion between the model and the app layer, right? And so you're talking about aggregation theory. So there's two views of the world. One view of the world is like everything consolidates into one company. And there's another view, which is there's like a model per thing that's a behavior. I'm definitely in the second one. And I just... even though we're relatively early, we do have 4 years of experience with this, and the story has just been disaggregation. It really has.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
How are you? How do you think about revenue quality in the enterprise and environment when the Fortune 500 sort of has a mandate to just buy AI? Some things they're going to.
That's a great. Yeah. So there's a lot to this question, and I'll try to be as succinct as possible. So the first most important thing is AI today is mostly a prosumer and consumer movement. So even though the people are working in the enterprise, it's like it's an individual use and individual behavior, and it's not like a big budget buying thing. And so I would say the vast majority of the companies we work with, it's this more kind of bottoms up prosumer thing. And so that's clearly real individual demand. This happens in all super cycles. Like it was the same thing for the internet, right? It was the same thing for PCs. It was the same thing for like the iPhone, like the true smartphone, like post BlackBerry. It was like individuals. And so, from that standpoint, like I think we're very, very comfortable. This is a real secular movement because it is individuals that are driving the behavior. There's a second point to all of this, which is, in the early internet days, you had all sorts of funny accounting because, and it was quite frankly because people just didn't know how to do it. These successful. But at the time, people weren't even paying, right? So they would just kind of say everything. And of course, in these early super cycles, you have all of that. Like they don't know the difference between like GMV and take rate and, run rate is not a GAAP thing. And so they kind of had, so there's clearly all these funny numbers out there. That's just an artifact of massive, massive growth and success. And we'll rationalize it as an industry, but for sure that's going on. But it's less about like enterprise budget moving. And it's much more about, I've got this consumer phenomenon. I have no idea how to really do the accounting, and so, it just requires from our standpoint to, just to kind of go through things and kind of really normalize it.
Yeah,
that's great.
That makes sense.
We could talk for another hour about this. We'd love to have you back on the show. This is fantastic. But thank you so much for even taking the time that you did.
Yeah, I wish we had more time. This was great.
No, love it. Thanks so much. It was a real pleasure. Cheers.
We'll talk to you soon.
Have fun. Cheers.
Bye.